Hello. How is everyone? Seeing some nods, some thumbs up. Amazing. There have been some great sessions at Money 2020 so far, and I'm thrilled to be here with you all to talk through how you're thinking about and using Gen AI to support your trust and safety efforts. I'm excited to start off, and Stephen, I'm going to throw the first one to you. Trust and safety is hugely important to every business that's out there. So curious to hear how you've seen Gen AI start to impact the trust and safety landscape.
Thanks. So first I would say, as we think about it from an industry standpoint, banks or financial institutions have been using traditional AI and machine learning for quite a long time in terms of modeling and a variety of use cases, fraud obviously being a central one. When we think about this in terms of trust and safety, we see Gen AI providing new challenges and threats, as well as new opportunities. On the challenges and threats, we look at things like deep fakes, whether that's related to videos and audios and written communications, and we see how that can get mixed with information that's on the internet, either through social media, public databases, even things that are available on the dark web. So I think about my own experience within the past year or so where I think I've had data breaches with my hotel provider, airline, email provider, and one of the healthcare providers. So I know there's a lot of information that's about me that's out there, and I know we get concerned about what that impact is going to be to all the trust and safety groups that are trying to fight fraud, understanding the power that's behind all that. Also, the management of data, we think, is really important. Who uses data, how it's being used, how it's being incorporated into the different training modules is going to be critically important, and it gets us concerned, and we think it's going to be a challenge going forward with Gen AI. On the opportunity side, though, there's a lot of ways in which we look at this as an organization, whether you're talking about code generation, conversational analytics, or low-code development activities, building up synthetic testing databases and data that can be used for identifying frauds. And then I think the obvious one that comes around, the efficiencies just within our trust and safety operation, making sure that we can operate more efficiently by using Gen AI and large language models to make the workflow easier.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think the data piece and keeping your eye both on the challenges and the opportunities is what we're thinking about. Hal and Elena, curious if you have anything that you'd add to that when you think about the impact currently and also as we look to the future.
Yeah, we also see a lot of, you see a lot of headlines and things that are going bad with Gen AI, and we hear about breaches and fakes and images that are synthesized. We also think there's a lot of opportunity on the defense side as well, and this might be a case of where you have to fight the machines with the machines and really employing the best technology to detect the fakes. And we think that's where where this will go in the future. But a huge opportunity to use Gen AI on the vendor or the solution side as well to help our customers defend themselves.
Would love to hear how you're thinking about using Gen AI as a way to help fight some of the challenges that you're seeing. How are you thinking about bringing it into the organization in a productive way for trust and safety?
Can I go?
Please.
Okay. So, I think what we've seen with our customers is that it can look like a huge challenge. You think, how do I get started with this? It's a big topic. And one opportunity we see and one thing that we enable is that you can get started slow and easier. And you can say, hey, where am I putting resources today, especially human beings, to detect fraud and to find the problems? And how can I sort of take the low-hanging fruit off the table so that I can turn some of those easier tasks over to the AI and trust it earlier and just kind of get started investing. The other thing we think is really important to do is to work with your teams and talk with them and leverage their expertise so that you don't just kind of come down from on high with some edict or directive, that you actually try something, work with the teams and see if it's helping them in leveraging their time.
Yeah, it's a similar kind of conversation that we're having with a lot of companies as well, is how can we bring Gen AI in, have it help support what folks are already doing today, and free up human time to do things that are a bit more creative or innovative, or they may not have time to do today. We've talked a little bit about how we're thinking about bringing AI into organizations and what you see in terms of trends. Curious, Elena, to hear your point of view on some of the impact that you're seeing at Walmart, and what are some of the considerations or hurdles or challenges that you are thinking through as you're bringing Gen AI in to support trust and safety?
Okay, I'll start with a question to the audience. So just to answer that question, can you raise a hand if you ever use ChatGPT? Marvelous. Did you ever receive an incorrect or partially wrong answer? Raise a hand. Thank you. So AI, it has an incredible potential to enhance trust and safety by providing real-time detection, adapting models, and really identify patterns. The best approach focuses on understanding the power of AI correctly to avoid biases and ensure data integrity. To do so, one must involve human intelligence in the loop to provide educated feedback and make well-informed decisions. And this is something that a lot is being missed, because there isn't some kind of assumption that artificial intelligence became so smart that you can just dump data and just assume that it will identify patterns. So the data integrity and the accuracy and the diversity of the data is really important when we are training the model to utilize it to address the trends and identify them, but also not forget the human part, the human intelligence, to really have this educated feedback when we do analysis and then adapt the model.
I think data integrity is a big one. Curious how you're approaching that. How are you thinking about data integrity, and what are some of the actions you're taking to make sure that it's set up in a usable way?
Yeah, that's a great question. So here's an example, a simple example. So when we as humans, we know that 2 + 2 = 4. And we learn it because we really learn it at school and understand why 2 + 2 = 4. But smart systems, artificial intelligence, if the model was trained with this information and you ask this question of 2 + 2, it will know to give you the output that it is 4, but it doesn't really understand why. And when we talk about trust and safety and fraud prevention, we really need to understand the why, because everything about fraud prevention is about behavior, is about social engineering, is about really understanding the mind of fraudsters. So you have to have this human part always integrated, and this is why when we incorporate this into processes, this always must be part of it.
How about for JP Morgan? Is this resonating and similar to how you all are thinking about it? Bringing the technology in, keeping a human in the loop?
Yeah, absolutely. We think about using it as a new technology and dealing with it as you would implement anything new. You will trial it out. You will use it on specific use cases. You will test it out further before expanding and making it more broadly available. So today, for example, and this is not necessarily just a trust and safety answer, but we've rolled out an AI assistant internally. It's controlled in terms of what it's been trained on. It's only on bank data. but I think it's upwards of about 140,000 people. They've rolled out something that can be used and experimented and explored for further applications just within the bank more broadly.
And Hal, you mentioned kind of some excitement around bringing it in to address some of those low-hanging fruit areas of opportunity, at the same time giving folks more time to work on more creative pursuits. Curious what you'd say on the flip side that you are keeping in mind from a challenge perspective or a hurdle perspective as you're bringing Gen AI into Trulioo.
Yeah, that's right. And so, to be clear by the numbers, about 75% of what we see is sort of like low-grade fraud, like easy to detect, like cut and pasting on driver's licenses and things like that. 25% is sort of intermediate, like getting a little more sophisticated, but you can still spot the inconsistencies, let's say, between the data on the front and the MRC on the back. So you can see the inconsistencies. Like about 1% is really sophisticated fraud that we see now. And when we look at that, we think that's probably the fraud that's coming in from like Gen AI. It's really good. So how do we invest in it? We think, okay, the easy stuff we can do now with automation. The hard stuff, the 1%, is like that's the next challenge, right? And so then we think, okay, how can we train models to get the 1% and catch it? And how can we stay ahead of the wave? Because I think we all know it's accelerating and we need to stay ahead of it. So how do you stay ahead of it? You kind of recognize it's coming and sort of build for the future to see it.
Yeah, and I was just going to add, and I think the trick really is to obviously improve the precision of your models, right? Get to a point where you can minimize the false positives, because what we all really want to do is we want to create some friction, right, on just those transactions and that activity that deserves to have some friction. You have some suspicions about its veracity. But there's a whole series of transactions that you want to be able to let go, and you don't want to have a negative client experience. So it's really important that we can use this to improve the models to make them better.
What recommendations do you have for companies who want to do exactly what you're saying? Want to go in, make sure they're approaching it correctly so they can capture the 1% or some of the percentage of fraud that they're seeing?
Well, one, I think that you want to work and experiment with the technology and understand where it's going to apply benefits. Try it out within particular use cases before you go too broadly. I think the point around humans is really important, so you want to make sure that you've trained people on your staff and you have the expertise to know how to use the technology, and then obviously to be suspicious about transactions and have the ownership to be able to raise questions and escalate items that they're suspicious about. But it probably will follow a pretty similar path of how you introduce new technology within an organization. This just carries a lot greater weight to it.
Yeah, that makes sense. Hal, anything that you'd add, or Elena, anything you'd add to that one?
Yeah, actually, Steve said some really important things. I feel like it summarized very well how we deal with fraud prevention, trust, and safety. An example that I want to bring for that is from one of the books that I love the most about AI. It's called Hello World by Hannah Fry. It's not a new book. It published like a few years ago. We had a lot of advance since then, and the AI, the smart systems have created incredible things since then. But if you read this book, everything that is written there is still relevant. Like the development still does not address it. And one of the chapters there talks about AI use cases in the justice system. So there are other chapters about other industries as well, even music, how AI used to create music, for example. But the justice system emphasizes so well and so strong of how the wrong decisioning and having false positive and false negative in an oversight can really make a distinction between a death sentence and life sentence. And the example that was brought there was really on biases that the machine had on previous sentences, because previous sentences had most of the data on Afro-American men that were sentenced to jail. And then this way, when there were other sentences, the machine learning actually created the decisions based on that. And it was very, very interesting to see, to read this use case. So I think it's really emphasized how AI is powerful, and it's really a powerful science of building smart systems, but it requires really careful handling to prevent biases and ensure accurate as possible outcomes. And this where comes the critical thinking that really Stephen was talking about with the teams and training them well, and really making sure that you have a team of investigators and not, for example, assigning this decision and analysis to customer service. So I have seen this happening in companies, so I really think that it's very valuable.
Yeah, I think I'm hearing two big consistencies: data integrity, having kind of a human in the loop. We've seen, it feels like, several iterations of Gen AI already, even though we're still very early in our AI journey. Curious to hear how from you, if we kind of play things forward, what is the type of impact that you either are already seeing or you hope to or anticipate to see from Gen AI in trust and safety?
Yeah, I think there's been a theme so far of data being so important, right? And we could not agree more. Whether the data is about like biometrics you're capturing on document verification, or whether it's KYC data on people, we look at hundreds of countries, thousands of customers, think about all those combinations. And then if you look at business data and kind of factor that in, the amount of data can just be overwhelming. So how you manage it, watching out for biases, making sure you govern the data well. This is a huge central theme for us. And it is actually something that, I actually think we have the advantage here looking forward, because someone's always probing your defenses and trying to figure out a way to get through. But if we share data, look at consortium models, if we can protect each other, I think that's the future of us defending ourselves, being really smart about AI and what we implement, and also sharing the defenses amongst each other so that we can take advantage of each other's learnings. And when one customer, one person gets breached, everyone else can benefit from that and not get breached, and we can learn from it. So I think that's really important. I think that's the future of this, that more cooperation, more defenses, more sharing of data amongst those of us who want to do right by our customers and protect them.
Yeah, Steve, I'm curious to hear your perspective as you think about the impact. Are you seeing impact today, or is there additional impact that you'd hope to see as we look to the future?
So the impact is a little more indirect for us. We're in payments, so we don't see as much at the front end. We see only when the transactions are coming through. So we know, because probably the number one cause of a lot of the fraud that we see are business email compromise. So we're fairly certain that this is impacting our customers before the transaction gets to us, but we don't immediately see it for us. There are other parts of the bank where they'll be worried about onboarding, consumer banking and whatnot, but we see it a little where we're focused on, which is really on the payment. We don't see it as much. What I would say are there are places where we're seeing the applicability around modeling and getting fraud mitigation programs in place that we think will be able to leverage things like AI. Is when you start looking around the world at different payment platforms, countries, and payment rails, they're slowly introducing additional requirements for the paying participants or the banks or the payment processors. So in the UK, there's a confirmation of payee. In Europe, there's a verification of a payee that's coming into place next year. Australia and India doing the same. And here in the United States, NACHA for ACH payments, not to get too geeky on payments with everybody, but NACHA is going to be requiring any originator in 2026 to stand up a fraud mitigation program. So we think that the actual use of fraud models and AI to build those models getting better is going to be much more pervasive in the US, particularly around payments.
Are there other services or products, like the fraud mitigation models potentially being one, that you anticipate being possible now because of Gen AI that may not be possible today or may not have been possible before?
We're clearly exploring a lot of models, not all of which I have full exposure to, so could speak to knowledgeably, but within our trust and safety group, we're also worried about things like sanction screening and things like that. So there's a lot of compliance related activities that we perform on behalf of the bank. And in those cases, we're clearly going to be using those types of models to improve our performance.
How about for Walmart, Elena? Curious your point of view on some of the products and services or ways of approaching fraud and identity protection that are possible now with Gen AI that may not have been possible before.
To be honest, at this time, I think the fraudsters are way ahead. And that's because using AI and having such quality deepfake, a lot of the startups and solution providers that offer, for example, the solutions that only focus on that specific area. So that might be where we really have a huge challenge, because we really got to get ahead with this. But the risk signals that I would say that they're the classic ones and never get old and really are the best when we're talking about fraud prevention, trust and safety, is really the geolocation. Those are things that, as long as you have the incorporation of identifying the VPN, the spoofing, all of those things to really get a hang of that part, this is very, very strong. And then with the other things that concerns the artificial intelligence, so we have to kind of get ahead with the point, as I mentioned, because fraudsters are really enjoying it. They are doing it for the fun at some point, right? Like, I mean, we're doing our job because we're really enjoying it, and they do their job because they're really enjoying it. So for them, it's a full-time job, and they have the whole day to just talk with ChatGPT and do prompt engineering. So really, we are at a point that at some point I feel like AI put us in like 0-1 to the fraudsters.
That's fair. We've got to catch up then.
We gotta do that.
Yeah. Hal, what would you say to companies who want to catch up and may also hold that point of view? What's a recommendation or a tangible action that folks can take?
So I think employing the proper tools, getting started with it now, really realizing that the fraudsters are at it and they're using the most sophisticated techniques out there. They're really at it. So I think getting started with it. I think another kind of human-oriented recommendation I think I would make is get started and do what you can do. Run in parallel with your human teams for a while and figure out gain confidence in your approach and get that buy-in from the human teams. Another thing I would say, and I think we've all observed this, is that you're going to have analysts on your team that are really good at some aspect of what they're doing. Like you got your expert on identifying that the selfie doesn't match the document, or that some pattern with onboarding doesn't seem quite right. And you'll have different experts in the organization that are good, and your own teams that are good at different things. One of the things that technology can bring to this that makes me confident that we'll win, the good guys, is that the technology lets you bring all those best practices together, like an expert system, right? You can say, I'm going to take the best, image recognition. I'm going to detect liveness. I'm going to detect injection attacks. Like we found an injection attack just within the last couple weeks going on at one of our customers using our technology and document verification, and it was like, this is great. That kind of multi-layered approach to detecting problems, and then all of our customers benefit from that, right? Which is I think heartening. So I don't know, Elena. I would say that Gen AI isn't self-aware yet.
Well, I do want to add to the part that you mentioned about the consortium between companies. When if we do collaborate, it's much easier to really catch the bad actors, because if you have at one place that this bad actor, usually bad actors are working in gangs, so it's not like really a singular one. So if you already have another company that have dealt with one and already have this information, it obviously would be really much more beneficial when we would have had this consortium, because, as you mentioned, the bad actors, they actually have a consortium. And they have a lot of Telegram, and Facebook. Like, a lot of them don't even go to the dark web. A lot of them really open web that you can join without really knowing much cybersecurity, information security stuff and tools. So I think really having this awareness is where this is where you start really working on this and developing this, but really understanding this, because I know that I've talked with a few people and teams that they had no idea even how strong the deepfake. They had no idea how good it is. And they also had no idea that you can find this information so easily online.
Yeah, I think a tangible step that everyone can take for their own trust and safety is, to your point, Hal, getting started, getting educated, helping folks feel comfortable with it, so you can figure out what those opportunities are to help combat the bad actors and help the good guys win, which fully confident that we will. We're down to our last few minutes and wanted to give the panelists an opportunity to leave the audience with a message or something that you hope folks take away from today. So we'll go down the line. Stephen, do you want to start us off?
Sure. I think the component, and I think you've heard it from each of us a little bit on stage, is when we think about trying to use Gen AI or fighting fraud, or what we think about is there's really three components to it. It's got to be a sort of a multi-layered approach in our view, and that one is technology, having the right tools, technology available to you. The second one is data. Data is really important, and to Elena's point, the human element is really important. We can't minimize that. It's still important to train people, get the right level of expertise in place. Making people aware is a huge deterrent. But those three things come together, to me, are the really things that you should be focusing on within your organization, and not anchor on any single one of them.
At OpenAI, we say people, process, technology, and I think that aligns well with what you're saying. Elena, how about you?
Well, to be honest, I think Steve summarized very well also what I wanted to say. I'll give it to Hal.
I think Stephen summarized that really well too. I think that's really good. I guess, one thought I had is that I think all of us are challenged when we come to an event like this, because we look at all the messages and all the vendors and all the education, and it can be very, very confusing. And I think Elena gave us some good advice a few minutes ago to read up and study yourself, do your own research. I think ask really pointed questions of vendors and sessions you go to, and I would say a couple different fronts. One is, I'm an engineer, so I would say ask about the technology, dig into that, but also ask questions on how they can help you with your specific business problems, solve those problems, because nobody wants to do this just for fun. We all are business people. We're trying to get a return on our investment, and we want to make life better for us and our customers and save money at the end of the day. So I would say get educated and ask really relevant questions on how those around here can help you.
Actually, I have something to add, because with what Hal said, it just reminded me. With learning a lot of things from solution providers and what they do and what they build, which is amazing. Sometimes what I do see that solution providers can kind of have the sales pitches of what they're going to sell, but sometimes they have, and you probably have seen it as well, right? Sometimes it's like, yeah, we're gonna solve all your ATO, but then I'm asking, wait, what exactly do you do? So I think those questions are important, because a lot of times there is this miscommunication that a company can work on integration and a lot of steps that have missed, when essentially after months of work you identify, wait, that actually not really gonna help me with what I needed.
Asking good questions, having a good understanding of the challenges you want to solve. People, process, technology. I love it. Well, thank you all. This was an amazing conversation and really appreciate the time.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.